Okay, let me just make sure I've got, I think we've, okay.
Good evening. This is the regular meeting of the Village of Lake Bluff Architectural Board Review for February 5th, 2019, and I'll call the meeting to order. Okay, roll call, please, Mike.
Member Deegan,
Here.
Member Dahlman,
Here.
Member Callahan,
Here.
Member Kerouac,
Here.
Chair Hunter,
Here.
and members Russ and Waymeyer are absent.
Okay, next order of business is the minutes of the Architectural Board Review meeting, which I believe we were all at. No, Ed was not, because he couldn't be, because he shouldn't have been. So, anyway, if you recall, that was the, what did we call that?
The review of the appeal.
The review of the appeal for 419 Prospect. Anyway, so they're very, very, very lengthy minutes. Does anybody have any comments about them? Carol is not here, so we saved about 15 minutes on that because there's a lot of pages here. I don't know how you covered all that.
Yeah, it's a very
You
good.
really don't.
Well, I had help. Yeah.
Any comments? No? Okay. All in favor of the minutes of November 6th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody. Okay. Next is is there anybody in the audience that's here for something that's not on the agenda? Okay, good. The next items on the agenda are both public hearings, and I'm going to do it all at once, so anybody that plans to speak on whatever you're here for, you have to stand and raise your hand, and we have to swear you in.
Do we need to speak? I mean, or do you just vote on what's been presented?
No, if you think you need to speak, because it is a public hearing, even though the public's out there, but I need to swear you in if you think you're going to speak.
It's simple.
Answer questions or
Stand up
whatever.
and hold up your hand.
Just, yeah. Yeah. Okay, this is really simple. Stand, raise your hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and the testimony you are about to give? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
All right, thank you. See, that wasn't hard. Okay, first up then is a public hearing to review the site plan and alterations to sidewalks and landscaping adjacent to the golf clubhouse at Blair Park, 355 West Washington Avenue, and there it is on the screen. Does anybody want to talk about that?
I'm Gary Biskowski. I am the planner for the Park District. This work is being done.
Gary, one thing.
Gary over
Let's ask you to go to the microphone, because even though we can hear you just fine, we're on local cable access TV, and the people at
I'm
home
Gary
can only hear.
Biskowski. I'm the park planner. This work is being done to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Access. Currently, the clubhouse has some steep slopes that are not in conformance with the requirements. The sidewalk that we'll be putting in will be less than 5%, and will make the clubhouse accessible. Currently, there's asphalt on the north side. That's going to be removed, and the concrete walkway will replace that asphalt with a slope of no greater than 5%. Along with the sidewalk, we're proposing to provide some landscaping at the edges of that sidewalk. On the south side, we're putting a ramp in for means of accessing the clubhouse for the concession operations. This would allow a back door access for the concessionaire who is operating the facility. Once again, we're using concrete, and then there are some Grolo sumac that will be placed along the edges of that sidewalk. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Pretty simple, straightforward.
Okay. Tim, you're the landscape guy. What do you think?
Yeah, everything looks good.
See, I had a question about it says you're gonna use washed stone. Is that just around areas that aren't planted?
Yeah, currently, there's gutters where there are access points to the buildings. In other areas, there is no gutter. So it's basically just a rain edge between the foundation wall and out to the outer edge of the eave.
Okay.
Typically, those areas are very difficult if they're not irrigated to grow anything, and then between the dirt or mulch, then it gets washed away with the drip of that drip edge. So there's stone there now. That stone will be replaced similar to what's
So the
there.
landscape areas will be mulched then?
Landscape areas will be mulched,
Okay.
correct.
That's all I had.
Matthew?
No, looks good. Thank you. Nice set of drawings. Thank you.
Okay.
No questions?
Oh, boy.
I think it's fine.
Looks good to me.
I have to ask a question then.
Go.
And it has to do with maintenance of the plant material, and I like the plant material. We got some of this in our yard, and my recollection is that catnip is really cool, but it just keeps going.
Well, that's why we like it, because it just keeps going.
That's what I
We found that, when you end up trying to put things in that struggle and it doesn't keep going, you end up replacing it, where you put some things that don't require a lot of maintenance. It does get a little ruly,
Yeah. You just
once in a
cut it
while,
all
just
the
cut
way
it back and,
Yeah, all right.
keep it under control.
I go at it with a weed whacker. Okay.
It'll take it.
Yeah, that was my only question. Looks good. I'm glad to get rid of some of that blacktop stuff.
Yeah.
Any, no further questions, then need a motion?
This has to go to the village board?
Yeah.
Okay, then I move we recommend to the village board that they approve this item as submitted.
Second.
Do we need a roll call? We need a roll call.
Yep. Member Deacon,
Aye.
Member Dahlman,
Aye.
Member Perewick,
Aye.
Member Callahan,
Aye.
and Chair Hunter.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much on behalf of Lake Bluff Park District.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks very much. You're gonna do this in the spring?
And I can put that on the agenda for Monday night for village board approval. Recommended, but, just in case of questions, but it's up to you.
If it's
Yeah.
like tonight, no.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay. Next is the public hearing to review site plan to add an overhead door to the building at 950 Albrecht Drive. Somebody here for that? And, this is really pretty self-explanatory.
My name's Mark Augustine. I represent Profile Plastics in their desire to add an on-grade overhead door to the west wall of their facility on Albrecht Drive. The need for the overhead door is in anticipation of an expanding manufacturing operation from across the street into this building so that they can accommodate their thermoforming equipment moving in. Right now, there is no on-grade door. There's only dock doors on this building, depressed dock doors. So they need this door to accommodate moving in equipment. Any questions?
Ed? What can you say?
I mean, I don't at this moment unless somebody else has anything to.
Yeah.
I had one question. When it says they're going to be painted brown, is that to match the window frames on the office portion? The dark-
It's really, the intent is to pick a color, and these are standard manufacturer colors, so it's a baked-on enamel finish. It's not field painted, so it's much more durable and will last longer. The mocha color is a very close approximation of the brick that's on the building, so that it would be less noticeable to anybody that might drive by. But it'll be very difficult to see this particular overhead door anyway because of the landscaping that's there. And in the direction of travel, you've got about a 25-foot window when you're driving in your vehicle or walking that you can look down this elevation of the building and pick it up. So,
The only thing I'd suggest with that is that the door beside it be painted the same color as what the the big door is going to be. Small door right here,
Okay,
just a suggestion.
we can do that. Not a problem.
Matt?
Is this area of the warehouse heated?
Yes,
So will this be insulated?
it's an insulated, actually quite a, these are the doors we prefer to put on. It's a foamed in-place door so that you don't have loose pieces of metal surrounding a loose piece of insulation.
Okay.
This is almost like a freezer panel. Very durable, high R value, easy to maintain, and holds up very well under wear and tear.
Great.
No
That's it.
questions?
Yeah, nothing?
Good.
Okay, I have nothing, so, once again, need a motion.
Can we just approve this one, or does this need to move forward?
No, it would need
Same
to be a
thing.
recommendation.
Okay.
to the
I
village board.
approve that we recommend this to the village board as submitted.
Okay.
I recommend that we approve
Second?
that.
Second?
Your second for
Write
Matt?
that correctly.
Yeah, I will. Motion to recommend approval to the village
Another
board.
roll call.
Okay. Member Callahan.
Aye.
Member Kerouac.
Aye.
Member Dahlman.
Aye.
Member Deegan.
Aye.
And Chair Hunter.
All right,
Get it
Okay.
before the ice.
Recommendation
Thank you.
passes, 5 ayes. And I can put that on the village board agenda for Monday night also. Yep.
Same place, same time?
Yeah, right, 7 o'clock Monday evening. Yeah.
We'll have her.
if you live
Okay,
in
great.
Morton
Thank you.
Grove, don't show.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Sure. no
Thank you.
problem.
Be careful out there. Slippery already.
Okay, next is what is next? The dates?
Meeting schedule.
Meeting
yeah,
schedule.
For the year.
Do we have any issues with the schedule?
Nope.
It's pretty standard of what it always is unless we change it.
Yeah.
Right, yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve it?
Oh, do we have to do that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Motion to approve?
I second.
All in favor?
Wondering,
Aye.
did you look at the dates for July 2nd and September 3rd as to how close they are to the holidays?
Yeah, well, we can talk about that. I did look at it, but it's
What's September 3rd?
right after Labor Day.
Hmm.
Let me just look.
I didn't look at my calendar. I just thought,
Oh.
okay, July.
So July 2nd is a Tuesday and the 4th is on Thursday. So probably not a problem there.
I don't think that's a problem.
And then September 3rd is the Tuesday after Memorial Day. So Monday is Memorial Day and then Tuesday, the day after it, is our meeting, so,
That's probably not a problem. Is that a problem?
yeah, okay.
Not a problem.
Okay, so that's good?
I'm usually out of town that week anyway, so I don't think I've been here for a meeting the week of Labor Day, ever.
Okay.
All right,
So all in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes.
Okay. So this is the staff report. Glenn, are you going to participate in this? You're going to lead it, I think.
Hey, Glenn.
Hey, evening, everybody. Hello. I know Mike Croak is the prettier of the staff liaisons here tonight, but I'm glad to be here with you as well. So, as you know, I'm not here every week, but glad to be here with you and talk about a few initiatives going on in front of our other boards and commissions. So, I've got a short list here, tried to cover a lot of it in writing to keep our time brief. That was before I knew we'd try to recreate ice road truckers out there, so we'll try to still keep it brief. But I think some interesting things going on we want your input on and we want you to feel involved in. The first, which a lot of these topics dovetail into, is one of your recommendations hanging out there from last year about revising site plan approvals. So we've been looking at this, looking at other amendments to the code. And we have, I think we have we can certainly meet what you recommended at a minimum, for sure. As we've been looking, we've considered and would bring to you a few additional ideas that really gauge out how you want site plan review to proceed, really. So your recommendation was just that this be clearly all non-residential properties And that would also be more clear that we look at things such as parking lot design or site furniture or street furniture in your review. Things we would recommend that you might consider as well is, one, the existing ordinance really is more made for planning commissions, if you look at it. It talks about things like engineering and public utilities. We would suggest that you consider removing those, renaming it something like design review, appearance review, commercial site review. There's a few permutations you can come up with, but something that clearly communicates, what your scope is the architectural board in looking at these plans. Another is just, again, thinking about how involved, how explicit you want to be about looking at street furniture, landscaping, parking lots, some language about maintaining landscaping in accordance with the site plan you approve, perhaps, and then looking at the idea of maybe tiers of minor changes. So right now, as you just saw, any change, however big, however small, goes to the village board for final approval. I know we didn't necessarily workshop this with the village board, but as staff, we've wondered, would it make sense to propose that at least some of these minor changes could be approved at this board directly without going for the two-step resolution process at that level? So I think perhaps there's where we should start our discussion.
Yeah, let's tackle this first bit first. Anybody have any, I have always hated the notion that this is called site plan review. We should call it something else, whether it's architectural design review or I don't like appearance review. What, does anybody have any comments on what we should call ourselves?
It could do like layout review, design, something not so subjective, maybe, like design review still feels like we're.
Well, that's what it is. It's architectural.
Right. So then I'm okay with design review. I think that's a pretty clear indication of what we're doing.
It's not as subjective as good taste review, so there's something to be said for it.
Which money does not buy,
Yeah.
so that's.
Anybody object to design review?
I don't prefer it.
You don't prefer it? What would you prefer?
Well, the same feeling as you did. It's not my preferred statement, like architectural site review or.
It's not site. I mean, site is a minor part of what we should be
Yeah.
doing every time.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
We can go with design review. I don't,
How about just architectural review?
Yeah, but it's not always architectural. Not to be annoying.
It is. What is it?
I don't know if we're looking at site or in landscape, I mean,
Could be
Well,
just
there's buildings.
landscape.
okay.
Could
But
be.
there's other parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we need a more encompassing.
Building and landscapes.
The architectural and
pedestrian.
design review, maybe we do a "and" in there.
This is going to be what it's called in the code, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
You'll be
So-
saying it at every meeting probably, so
Okay.
pick what you like.
Well, I guess we are the architectural board review, so maybe
That's what we're called.
maybe that's just fair and it's all encompassing.
Design review versus architectural review?
Yeah. Or something else.
Architectural and design review.
Yeah. I just think when we're looking at signs, that's not really architecture.
Nuancing, yeah.
Yeah.
Design review is fine by me.
Tim,
That's fine.
it encompasses everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
My freshman year in college, it was design.
design review, yep, right. Yep, so,
Till I retired. It still is design review.
yep.
Okay,
Great.
so, design review. Got that, Glenn?
Okay.
Jack?
What was the next thing?
Most contentious thing we've had in
Split vote.
In the last 20
in
minutes.
the last, for sure.
So just to make sure, as far as, you do want to be involved in looking at street furniture and looking at parking lots and looking at landscape, I'm seeing nods, yes.
Yep.
Language as far as making sure landscape is maintained with site plans, no objection there.
I don't know how that is done, but let's go back to, yeah, we have off and on been involved in all of the landscape planning, the parking lot planning. We've been involved, and all of a sudden things happen and we weren't involved. It's just sort of a hit or miss, so it should be legislated,
Bright line.
so.
And to some extent, there, Chairman Hunter, part of the problem is for many landscape improvements, Mike, you correct me if I'm wrong, we don't actually necessarily issue a building permit. You can go plant bushes and trees and things without asking permission first, and so that's how some of these things change. But at least in this case, where we're approving site plans for commercial properties, the draft we're kicking around would say essentially that, you can hold up the site plan and you can look at the lot, and if the two don't match, you can enforce it
Yeah, well,
without getting in the permitting
yeah,
business.
the landscaping is always part of the project. I can't think of one that we've done that doesn't have landscaping to look at.
Right.
Okay.
And since we are supposed to be concerned with the aesthetics of the village, I think we should be looking at all the parts of it,
Right.
which we also have done off and on. If it doesn't show up on the agenda, it shows up on the sidewalk, and we didn't know about it.
Okay. And then, as far as, again, this idea of, perhaps minor changes being able to be approved at this board, or maybe even at the building commissioner level, we wanted to see if you would recommend that to the village board as
I'm
well.
glad you brought that up, because the overhead door guy, that's a perfect example of something that comes in, you look at the building, you look at, okay, I can't even see that door.
Right.
Yeah.
And he has to come out, we have to spend time on it. Mike could look at it and say, what else are they gonna do? This is fine. And I don't know where you draw that line, I think you draw that line.
Yeah, and same with the water infiltration plant. I mean, they've done hours of presentation drawings, better than most, that they
Yeah.
probably could have used that time doing something better.
For a vent on the back of the building.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
it's-
Right.
and it's so far, I mean, it's,
Right.
and I drive by trying to see what we approved, and like, I
It's
don't
around
know.
the back.
Yeah,
You
it's
can't
like-
get in.
Yeah, it's like, they keep telling me, stop walking back here. So I'm in agreement that there's certain things, and even the telephone,
Yeah.
Well, every time
cell
they add
tower.
every time a cell,
an antenna.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think there was one time we were able to put a cable inside, and we felt very good about that, remember?
Well, when we
And then
said
we
you
ran out of
cannot, you can't keep adding to the,
Right.
they wanted to run all the cabling on the outside because
Yeah.
they couldn't hold it anymore.
Yeah,
So then we said, then you got to get a bigger,
Yeah.
and they started over from scratch.
yeah. Because that's, gets beyond our expertise quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
As soon as they walk in the door, it's beyond our
yeah.
expertise, right?
So I would
I'd
think
carry
so.
your comment further on the first item that we had tonight on the sidewalks at the Park District. That also seems to me to be an item that could have been approved by the building code supervisor. And I wonder, does it have to be by, the building code supervisor is also the village manager, isn't it?
No.
Yes. So there's a term, building commissioner.
Manager is
Building
the
commissioner.
Three guys.
Commissioner,
Yep, right.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
who?
That's the village manager, or the village administrator first, and then Mike Croak is a deputy, and village engineer Jeff Hansen is a deputy as well.
Because I was wondering, as we were doing both of those tonight, number one, why they were here, because they were no-brainers. The second issue is, why do they have to go to the village board?
I agree.
Right,
And it
yeah,
seems
that's the way the code's written today, but, right, we should make some exceptions in the code
Yeah.
for minor stuff.
It becomes a judgment call as to, and I'm sure that there would be certain where, you or the village manager might make a judgment call and everybody questions it, but that'd be rare. These are two that
Yeah.
didn't have to
And,
come to either.
And then there's other things that this goes back some ways, but when they, because the Park District is a separate governing body, they built the park shelters down there. Just boom, all of a sudden they were there. And Ken Street was the administrator at the time, and I said, wait a minute, these are major things and a major feature of the beach, and nobody got to look at them. Oh, yeah, they're okay. They're not a David Woodhouse kind of a thing, but they're okay. So I made a ruckus, and because they originally were not going to let us look at anything just because nobody thought they had to.
Right.
Now we look at everything.
Right.
But if you don't raise your hand, sometimes.
Okay. I think we're hearing the message loud and clear. We'll give it a shot. You know, the boundaries of this, I think, are best worked out when you have words on the page, but we'll get that back to you here in the near future before we bring it to the PCZBA for formal consideration.
How do you add stronger language to require landscape maintenance?
Well, right now, you know, there's some, you know, if we needed to, I think it's enforceable. I think we could say, here's your site plan approval, you're not doing it. But if you look, I mean, it's just sort of confusing in paper, right? It says you will obtain no permit without obtaining a site plan approval, but again, these landscape things don't necessarily need a permit, and so it's a little murky. And so similarly, you know, you might let landscaping die, and then there's the question of, you know, are you compelled to replace it in an exact manner, in the exact location, and things like that. And so really just defining our expectations there as far as what standard you need to keep up when you approve a landscape plan. If you need to make replacements, what are those without coming back to you? It sounds complex. I think it's simple in reality, but just something more than what's there today.
How would you do that? I don't know that we follow a lot of what we approve. 5 years later, you look at it, and they've done stuff. I don't know that it's a problem, but I don't know that it's not. You'd have to go around and look at landscaping all over town.
I think it's kind of a work in progress anyway. I mean, some things work and some don't.
Yeah,
and you just have to
something-
move on.
We
from-
approve something and it gets killed by ice or whatever, and, okay, that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
But they never come back to say, well, what would work? That's not our job.
There's
Yeah, I mean-
probably has to be some type of judgment about what's a significant change, you know, that changes the intent of the plan versus just, you know, maintenance that, you know, changes one flower for another because
Right.
one died or something.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But who polices that then?
Well, I guess it'd be up to me.
Okay.
Mike Croak, Flower Police.
Walking the dog, you can.
Right.
So if you guys can think of a way to do it that's doable, go ahead, but I don't know.
Okay.
What's next?
Sure. So this dovetails very nicely. If you turn to the second page, third page of the memo. Right now, the Plan Commission is considering potentially an ordinance that would centralize most of our parking requirements. So if you've done commercial development in the village, you may know we have something like 14 different sections in different places that talk about how you're supposed to park a site, which is, you know, it functions. It's not great. And so that's, I know, something that's been on a few plan commissioners' mind for some time is trying to put these in one place. And in the process of doing so, we've seen that there's some friction. I think that'll be worked out. One of the ideas, this came out of the Smedbo proposal, if you're familiar with it. So the Smedbo site at the south end of Waukegan Road.
Hasn't come to us yet.
No plan submitted yet, nothing like that, but the village undertook some zoning changes to potentially allow a medical office to be built on that corner lot. We're still awaiting word as if that deal will proceed or not. But that led to this idea, and so one of the thoughts is, looking back at the Waukegan Road corridor study, which this board participated in, there were these design guidelines for the whole L1 district. And one particular set was these dealing with parking lots that are fairly applicable throughout the village. And so our thought is, what do we recommend to you is, if we adopt these at the village level, you know, that's not a binding principle for you. There's no empirical yes, no, but does it give more guidance to you in considering these? You know, parking lot designs, does it give more guidance to developers? Does it make a better process to have some standards in place?
Something I was going to suggest, and I don't think, I was pretty heavily involved in that, and I think, Neil, you were involved in that Waukegan study. Were you here? Yeah, you were here, too.
Yep.
Is that we've got some parking lots that have minimal landscaping in them. Other ones are okay, but, I've seen some codes that designate X number of trees, if you want to call it that, in certain spaces for every number of cars, certain number of cars. If we could develop something like that. The part of the problem with the Waukegan study that we came up with was that there's, what'd you say, 14 different sizes?
I don't think that's an exaggeration, by the way. I think that's how many we cross off.
It's crazy. It was everywhere from, I think, 8 by something to, 10 by something in different lengths. But anyway, that should be standardized if you can even do it. You're not going to restripe every time on every street and every lot, but it should be standardized for the next guy.
Absolutely. And to your point, Chairman Hunter, I think that even exists, but it's only in the central business district. It's not actually applied to L1 or L2 where we have these larger parking lots.
We tried to do it out there, but that got shortcut when Target came along. And it's like, wait a minute, stop your work, you got to shift over to 176 for some reason that you don't know yet. So we never really, finished developing all that. The other thing that I think would be worthwhile is you talk about parking lot lighting and integrate that with whatever you're going to do with the parking lot.
Okay. We'll see what we can do.
We're kind of neophytes on some of that stuff, and, you think you got the best light there is, and all of a sudden something else comes along, and Brian's the best guy to tell us what that is.
We're going to talk about Brian's thoughts here in a little bit, so
Yeah.
stay tuned.
I had some thoughts on the sample that you brought up.
Yeah,
Do you want to talk about that at all?
that's up to the chairman. I'm
Which
here all night.
What are you talking about?
He has a recommended ordinance regarding parking lots.
Oh, yeah, we got to get back to that, right.
Yeah, so the real deal, much longer than this. This is just the design guidelines from the Waukegan Road Corridor Study. Happy to share the whole thing, but didn't want to bog you down too much. But happy to hear your thoughts on this piece too.
Well, I had a thought on, I guess, each of these. Number one was large parking lot areas discouraged. I certainly agree with that, as long as we recognize that if we create islands with landscaping on them and curbs, that the snowplows and other vehicles are going to damage the curbs over time. I don't know what you can do about that. The second one, visitor and employee separation, I think that entirely depends on the business. If you're looking at something like Pasquesi, where it's more of a retail business, and they have a lot of visitors as well as a lot of employees, that may be a good idea. But if you have another business that has, let's say, 30 parking spaces, and they have 2 or 3 reserved for visitors, the rest are all employees, I don't think it makes sense to have them separated. So it seems to me that one is thinking of one thing, but there's too many variables in there to make it that strong. The third one, when I read that, the heading just doesn't seem right. It seems like the word parking should be in there. It looks like it's about front and side yard landscaping, but it's really about is landscaping around parking lots. And it talks about the front and the side yard, and I wondered about the rear yard, because it depends on where you are. The rear yard may be visible to a very public area. And then the one about pedestrian access, I wasn't sure that I understood in some cases how that could possibly work. Like if you have a parking lot in front of a building that has about 30 spaces, 15 on each side of the paving, you're going to have a sidewalk on one side. What are you supposed to do to provide pedestrian access ways to the other side? And they're not going to. They're going to walk across the parking lot to get to the sidewalk.
And, I guess this is a perception case. When I read that one, because I thought about this a little bit too, I was picturing, here at the village, we go to a corporate center, Westbrook Corporate Center, something like that, and you might be familiar, but I mean, it's sort of vertical aisle, vertical aisle, vertical aisle, and so you could be walking hundreds of feet without a sidewalk. So that was more kind of my mental image. But you raise a good point too, that there's, in some of these cases, it just doesn't make sense to have that amenity if you're going across one lane of traffic, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Is this the way it was written from the study?
There's a slight amendment to section 3, but yes. So the automobile dealership business is new, the rest is taken verbatim from the study.
My recollection, and I may just be making this up, was that employees, visitors separation. When we were working on that study, the notion was that that whole area there could eventually turn into some sort of retail and business. And sometimes when you've got retail or business, the employees park right by the front door, and everybody else has to park wherever they can find a spot, just like out here on Center Ave, on Scranton.
I was good today, I parked back in the park, so.
So, didn't used to be that way. Anyway, these are sort of general and not understandable. What does anybody else think?
Yeah, and I also think we run into, like, at Target, you come out of that side lot development with the Chase and all that, and we have that big sign there, and we have these tall, probably George, prairie grasses, and you can't see, you're
you
edging
can't see.
out. We did bad there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a
That
dangerous.
sign right there.
And
yeah.
there's that curve, so you can't tell when someone's coming. So
That,
sometimes.
we missed that.
We missed it.
We missed it.
I feel like every time I do that, I'm like, man, we missed that.
Yeah.
So I do feel
Now
like
there's a
we
kind of slow there.
sometimes we over landscape, like we're creating hazards by all of this. You want to be able to see like other cars coming, so I just think we need to be aware that it may look great in plan, but sometimes we get too involved with that and not realize that, you need to be able to see, and people are sitting low, and that's just a general statement, but that one, I feel like we totally missed it. We couldn't put more barriers out there to see the intersection if we tried. It's just overloaded with,
Now there's a 6-foot pile of snow there.
yeah, and now there's a 6-foot pile of snow. So that was just, we get caught in so many things, and that was.
I mean, I don't know if it's ever written anywhere. Sometimes we notice that and say, hey,
Right.
there's a visual,
Yeah,
you
we
can't
just,
see around
for
the
some
corner
reason,
here.
we missed, I mean, it's all just right there, and very
Yeah.
tough coming around that turn, and they're driving fast, it's a street.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, you're kind
Well,
of
they're
pulling
not
out.
driving fast unless they want to get airborne.
No, but I mean, coming around, back, what,
Yeah.
park, the.
They're coming out of the parking lot, right?
Yeah, or just coming down that back way, that
That
back
back
shagbark,
road.
right, whatever that,
Yeah.
whatever the road we're calling that. Anyways, it's like, I feel guilty every time I go there, I'm like, shoot, we missed that. So, that's just my thing. We get over involved sometimes with all these things that look great on plan, and we're creating hazards for these parking where you really want to see all these things going on. There's a lot of moving parts in these parking lots, so that's said my piece.
Glenn, has anybody looked at, sometimes I hate to say this, but at what some of the other communities have done as far as, trying to designate some parking ordinances besides, besides size?
Yeah, so there's, I'd say there's essentially 3 approaches, right? One, you mentioned, I think Chicago actually was a national leader in it back in the late 80s, early 90s, is sort of the formulaic. You have this many parking spots, you have this many feet of green space, empirical standard is what it is. Some communities will adopt design guidelines that, maybe they have an ABR to review or a staff member who does these reviews as part of a plan development. And then others kind of leave it to chance, to be honest with you. They don't really have anything specific to parking. As far as, anything more specific than that, I'd have to come back to you. But those are sort of your three general approaches that I'm familiar with.
Now, I don't know that anything's going to be coming down the pipe, but it seems to me like there are more parking lots that are a third empty all the time, which is just a bad thing for everything. And that's based on our one spot for every 250 square feet of retail or whatever it is, there's 2 or 3 different things. Is there any thought to starting to look at that?
Sure. So, nationally, and me and Mike talk about this quite a bit, so he's going to get a laugh out of this. But nationally, the trend is certainly towards reducing these minimums. In some cases, the idea is, let the market figure it out. Really the first person that's impacted, if there's not enough parkings, that property owner, it's pretty rare that spillover happens. In some cases, in some municipalities, they're actually going to parking maximums, saying, okay, we need to discourage people from building out too much, parking compared to the site, because if land is cheap, they'll do it, which is bad for a lot of reasons. Here in the village, I wouldn't say that we've had that discussion yet. I think it's percolating to some extent. I would say that if you look at our table of uses, what's interesting is there are some that are kind of aberrations, right? There are some that don't make sense when you line them up in one place and compare them. But by and large, if you take one from us, if you compare it to another community, ours are actually usually pretty low. In many cases, we've set the bar on the lower side from a general standpoint. But still, oftentimes, in the industrial park, for example, we'll have, especially in the multi-tenant buildings, I think we've run into this a couple times, Mike, you would know better than I, but, we'll have people that become underparked because they change uses or they, occupy more of a space, things like that. But as far as in this process, what the PCZBA is looking at, I think the idea, when we brought it to them, it was really just make the changes you need to make for this Smedbo site that we had a lot of consensus around, and then mostly just consolidate everything into one place. So even if it has its blemishes still, at least we can see what they are. Whether or not there's an appetite to take a deeper dive, I don't think there is at this time, but I don't know.
Okay. I mean, I remember when the Target people said they based their parking lot numbers on Christmas Eve. Was that it, Christmas Eve? You remember that? It was their busiest, absolute busiest time. Well, things have changed in the last few years.
Yeah.
Anyway, this seems very generic and not really guiding principles here.
I think regarding parking, the national firms that come in, like Target, they have a pretty good idea of what they need for a parking lot.
But it's based on history of a while back.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know,
But
from
other
Amazon.
places, like where you're talking about with Smedbo, where it might be a medical facility, get a group of doctors together and ask them how many parking spaces they need, and they don't know what you're talking about.
No, they don't. No.
Now, developers, that's interesting in that there's actually a relatively speaking, a lot of consensus for that use and what developers ask for. Usually they're looking for a minimum of 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Ideal is probably 5 to 6 per 1,000 square feet. And so that's a pretty consistent ask. Whether they need that much, I don't know. I mean, it comes back to what you were saying. There are very different medical practices that can turn around many different people. If you've got a primary care clinic, they're coming in and out every hour. If you're, like an ear, nose, and throat kind of guy, you're seeing 10 people a day in the same space.
It really varies.
I don't know what else to talk about here.
Is there a problem regarding it? I know they want to study it. But are they trying to find a solution for maybe a problem that is not a problem? I do like the idea of taking all the disparate things and putting them in one place.
Yeah, so there was the consolidation idea, and then, when we put this together and put it out there, the thinking was, so in context, the Waukegan Road Corridor Study says right now, Waukegan Road, you have to be 100 feet setback off of it. And so up until recently, that was clear 100 feet. No parking lots, no buildings, no nothing. If you're familiar with the Smedbo property, that takes out over half the site. Can't do anything there, because it's sort of a trapezoidal shape. I don't think that's a trapezoid. You guys are the architects, don't judge me. Better at drafting than I am. And so the Waukegan Road Corridor Study said drop that to 50, and even then I think it says to bring parking into that 50 feet, provided that it meets these standards, that's landscape and so on. And so at the time of the study, it looked like the compromise was, we'll let parking go further out, we'll apply more aesthetic controls to these, and that'll be the compromise. That'll make sure things don't run away. And so we revisited that compromise with the Plan Commission to say, all right, we're going to allow parking to go further towards Waukegan. We're going to allow it in places it hasn't been before. But if we want some guardrails on this, let's make sure there's some more articulated standards for what's good parking in that space. And so that was the sort of the kernel that led to this.
I'm trying to remember because it never was finished and it never was adopted. Did say, let's make the 50 feet 100 feet 50 feet. We defined what could be built within that 50 feet, or not within that 50 feet, what kind of building would happen at 50 feet and beyond, as far as height and step backs and things like that. I don't remember saying there could be any parking whatsoever in the first 50 feet. And I read something somewhere, and maybe it was watching the presentation of that building that we haven't seen yet. And the guy talked about parking in front of Ferrari. That's not parking, that's a paved lot that is not parking. So, there's a little shine on going here. But anyway, I think once you start letting, we're getting off, now I'm on my soapbox, that once you start letting that parking happen in the first 50 feet, that whole green belt is going to go away. It's just going to be
You mean the
gone.
first 50 feet after the 50-foot setback?
No, within the
Oh,
50-foot
within the
setback.
first, yeah.
And that's what you're saying they're going to allow.
And I might be butchering the plan. I can tell you what happened for sure is the Plan Commission's recommendation, which the Village Board adopted, was building setback 100 feet, parking setback 50 feet. So between 50 and 100 is new space available for parking, but not for buildings. So I might have butchered the
Well, that's
report there. but-
that's even more severe than what.
But I think, right, but part of that conversation was if you're trying to put retail, not the SMED, but
Yeah.
if we're trying to put retail, and you want to direct that retail, the front yard is Waukegan and not the back, you don't want to have the front of your business there and you're parking behind the building. So that's the conflict.
Yeah,
Is that-
there was a conflict.
You want, if you have
Because
retail, you want to be able to park in front of the retail. So that means
The
you're
retail
parking
notion, I
in.
think, is, that's gone bye-bye.
Yeah, but that was the only reason I thought we allowed parking in front, is if that.
Not within the first 50 feet.
No, but if there's retail there, they wanted to get the parking in front of the retail.
Yeah.
Instead of in the back and then walking to the front
Right.
of the, so I think any other use, it doesn't make sense.
But then you look at Pasquesi, which is retail, and it's just the opposite, the parking's
But
in the
his
back.
Yeah, but they're,
The front
the front of the
door-
door
Right,
is,
is the back.
I'm just saying if they're trying to create a front experience on Waukegan, you want to park where that front experience is.
Right.
That's the better situation, not park behind it and walk all the way around. And I have a problem a little bit with like separating out visitor parking and employee parking so drastically. I mean, I think if you have like 80 employees, right, and you have, maybe that makes sense, but when you have like 5 employees to create this whole thing that seems,
Just say, park over at this end of the lot.
yeah,
people.
that should be a policy within the
yeah.
business itself, like just courtesy.
And I think
not-
it is.
Yeah, and that is, I don't think we should say you got to park on the side or back of the building. That it could be dangerous, actually, for certain
Yeah.
buildings. So that's just a small item.
So what I'm hearing is, this is a no-go from the sounds of it, at least this section of it.
I don't think it really does much.
Yeah.
Okay?
Although, I'll go back and say, if maybe there's a certain acreage or something on parking lots where you do designate certain kinds of landscaping within it. Landscape islands, whatever they are. And coordinate it with the lighting, which we'll get to later. Anybody disagree with any of that?
No.
If you can figure out how to do that.
Okay? Me and Mike will get together, we'll get the cookbook out, so.
What's next?
Sure, so this one, you can be our architectural board of review this time. So we're switching the first couple items coming from our plan commission, primarily your interaction with the plan commission. These back three coming from Brian Renner, Marina Puryear, the good gang over at our Sustainability and Community Enhancement Committee. So the first one up is we're currently looking at, or this committee, I should say, is currently looking at recommending some additional bike racks in the central business district. As I understand it, this committee has typically looked at street furniture additions in that area, and so we wanted to bring you some choices. So to give you a bit of context, so right now typically we use like a grid type system that you're probably familiar with. It's also called a schoolyard rack. Not a whole lot to it architecturally, and also not recommended for installation anymore. It's pretty rare that you see them around just because it's pretty easy to damage wheels in them. If you trip or go into a frame, the wheel bends because it kind of captures that wheel. It's also not really a good way to lock up bicycles. So for example, we've seen some theft issues at the train station in previous years. So we're trying to get away from that design necessarily. In choosing some of these are, there are more elaborate designs out there, more architectural designs certainly, which we could review if that's your direction. These certainly, they're not very flashy, but they're simple. They really take two bikes. Whatever kind of bike you have, you can hook it to this. There's no odd bars or wheel captures or anything like that that would keep, say, a tandem bike from being hooked up here the same as a regular bike. We know we're always going to be able to get these. These designs have been around for a while, and they'll keep being around. And then they also give us, some room architecturally for some branding elements. So whether that's the village logo or maybe a couple other things we hope to look at in the future. You can see that there's a space to have a laser cut template put in there that still leaves some room for the lock to get in, but that can add a little bit of pizzazz to this piece of furniture in the downtown. We've got a lot of color choices. I think your typical black is probably what we'd choose to proceed with, but wanted to bring you these options and here's some feedback on this project.
Well, I appreciate that we're going to get the same bike racks around where we have bike racks, and we talked about that ages ago. But what do the bike people think works the best?
These two racks. So there's if by bike people you mean the professionals, these are kind of the two racks most typically recommended by the bicycle parking manual of APBP, which, trivia question here, I think it's the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals or Planners, one of the two. So they have a whole 50-page binder on how to make bike parking. These are two of the the higher level ones for streets, just because again you have 2 points of contact, you can lock a bike up to them real easy, not a whole lot of flashy that gets in the way if you have a non-traditional bike.
Anybody got any thoughts on this?
One I do, the darker ones that I see, other areas where I've seen bike racks, I like the idea a lot. And I like the idea of the one that perhaps could put a logo in it or an LB. Right now, the one here says TC. One concern I've got is the ones that are dark color are probably painted, and when you take bicycles with all the metal on them and start rubbing them against these, the paint's gonna come off. And in about 5 years, they're gonna really look awful, and nobody's gonna wanna spend the money to paint them. And if you do, they're gonna scratch all up again real quick. But the one up here that's kind of a, looks like it's an off pewter color or silver color,
Galvanized.
maybe that wouldn't show the scratches.
I feel like all the bike racks that I've seen like this, that are painted black, powder coated or whatever, they all rust. Like at the base from salt, like they just, rust gets underneath and pops off the paint. I like the look of it, but I don't know about the durability.
I would worry about scratches to my bike. I wonder if anyone does a vinyl coating or something like that that's easier on the bike.
There is a, I don't know, I think we'd limit the color choices, I'd have to see if it's in black, but there is a PVC coat method as well. So your choices, let's see if I remember this, you've got powder, you got PVC, you've got galvanized steel, and there's another bare metal option that I can't remember. It might just be stainless.
I like the PVC, that's a nice idea.
Yeah.
And how many are we looking at quantity-wise?
So that is up in the air. That has a lot to do with budget. In our, if you take the standards of that guide and you apply them, I believe it's something in the neighborhood of, I have a sheet downstairs I meant to bring up too, so this is a little embarrassing. 20, it's about 20 over at the train station. You've got 3 here. And I think you have 14 or 15 in the rest of the central business district. So about 1 bike rack for every planter is the comparable, which is a lot of bike racks.
Yeah.
So that uses they have like an urban formula and a suburban formula, presuming that fewer people will bike. That's sort of their suburban formula recommendations.
Aren't some of the bike rack, maybe they're all, the old pipes that are like 4 inches on center? You know, the old-fashioned bike racks that have been around since I was, in 3rd grade. Isn't that what we have at the train station? And down at the corner by
It's
church
the
office?
schoolyard setup out at the train station, yeah. So it's like a
Oh, just the old
12-foot
ones.
long
Yeah.
array, and then it's got the little
Yeah,
thin
so
pipes.
you get about
Put your
1,000
tire in.
bikes in
Yeah,
20
but
feet.
you can only do a tire or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just
You
go
have
with
to
the
like
tire.
put your bike over the
Yeah.
rack and
Yeah.
hook it in.
So those don't work anymore, because,
Yeah.
not since they get quick disconnect wheels.
Yeah, well. None of the kids
And power
lock up their
tools.
bikes, so,
No, they just drive
like,
them.
none of them do.
No, it's not
So-
cool.
You don't really get many bikes in one of these areas that we've got.
2,
designated.
right? 2 per,
Yeah, so the thinking is you get 2 per rack. If you look at what's at the train station right now, and I may even go grab the sheet to get the numbers right, in theory, if you jam in a wheel at every opportunity, you can get something in the order of, I think it's 56 or 58 bikes in there. This is technically a decrease, and that it'll go down to 40 bikes, but that's clear space for 40 bikes instead of just kind of getting a wheel in there.
and have we done any, I don't even know how you do a study.
Some
but
counts.
Some kind of like, what we feel we need there? Because I've never seen 40 bikes there, but I may not be there at the right time.
I haven't either.
I'm not going, so 2 fronts. One, we do have some counts taken from over the summer
Yeah.
that I believe showed in the 30s range.
Yeah.
So you want to leave a little extra room too. I would say so I usually take the train up and down from Lake Bluff, and there are certainly days when I see at least in the racks in the main area, you can't fit anything else in there.
Right.
The racks that are further down on the platform, those are a little less used.
And cost on I'm sorry, did you say we don't know?
Yeah, so cost, this hitch form, a lot of the cost depends how fancy you get with the laser cut insert. They charge by the inch for the laser cutting. So this bike hitch is the cheaper. I think it's in the neighborhood of $2 to $250 delivered. Again, with the laser cut, with the whatever coat you do and with freight. This, potentially you're in a higher neighborhood, you're potentially up to 400 delivered. Now that being said, most of the ones we order, we won't do the insert. I mean, if you have 15 racks, you only really need them on the end caps. For when we get around, the SEC's thinking is do the train station first, do here at Village Hall first, and then see how that goes while we figure out if and where and how to do them in the rest of the central business district. When you get to the central business district ones, where those are more standing alone, each one of those you'd probably do the brand insert in, just because those will be higher visibility, or certainly a greater percentage you would.
It's like just a piece of bent pipe.
Yeah. Don't we know?
I feel like I'm in the wrong
Right.
business.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, most street furniture, I mean, you guys probably know, that's pretty cheap for street furniture.
Still in the wrong business.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw how much one of these trash cans cost, my eyeballs
Yeah.
popped out.
Bent pipe.
Yeah.
A place to look at just to compare might be the Botanic Garden, because they get a lot of bicycles. Be interesting to see how they approach it.
Okay.
Are they outside the garden? Really? I don't remember that.
Yeah, there's,
They've got a big
I wanna
bike
say
rack
it's-
right by, outside their main building, just
Yeah.
before, as you're coming into the main building.
I want to say it's like these,
I think it might
like
be.
just a loop.
Yeah, I
But
think
they're
so.
all, there's a whole bunch of them.
Right.
So you want us to make a recommendation on which one we like?
If you want to, you can. If you're comfortable with either, we can proceed in that way. I mean, if I'm leaning, I lean the hoop just because it gives us a bit more real estate to work with, but
I'm
any
for
of these are
simple.
fine.
Yeah.
I remember, and maybe you were part of it, when Highland Park decided to go to, and put the street furniture in, they bought everything in the catalog. Oh, Lord. It's still there, isn't it?
Oh, it's
I
still
mean,
there. It
it's
was-
just-
They
it's
bought it 40
massive.
years ago, and they haven't kept it up ever since.
But I mean, too much is too much.
Yeah.
I like whatever works. I don't know that we need to decorate each one of these things.
I don't,
Yeah.
seems like a waste of funds.
Yeah.
And certainly, I don't think we would decorate each one of them.
Well, I'm not even sure you need to do it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that gets you.
Simple is better.
It's something to get beat up.
Yeah.
Or somebody's gonna figure out how to break it off, take it home, stick it over there.
And if they do get beat up and start looking bad, then that's the public image we're putting forth.
You buy beat up ones to begin with.
Well, and
From
like
Highland
the
Park.
guys that have the really expensive bikes that go to Hansa, they just put them against the wall.
Yeah.
You know, they don't put them on bike racks.
One of my favorite photos was, I was, when I was doing my little survey for this, I was in front of Bluffington's. And so there's a full bike rack right around the corner there, but it's out of sight. Not one bike there. There's bikes on tables, there's bikes on chairs, there's bikes on the menu board,
Yeah.
none in the rack.
They want to be able to see them.
Yeah.
Hooks on the walls.
There you go.
Yeah. I'd like the simple hoop also. And that PVC sounds good, but I don't know what that,
Yeah.
probably over time, that
Yeah.
makes the most sense.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I would be good with that too.
Huh?
Yeah, I would be, good with that as well.
But it seems like they're
The PVC one,
they're
that one that Matt was
miles
talking about.
apart. These look like they're set up to either sell more of these things, or so handicapped people can get in there with their wheelchairs and things, I mean, they're really far apart.
Yeah.
And, some of the thinking there is, these are definitely built for bigger cities, and so to your point about ADA, the idea is, you can guide this in without having to lift it over another bike, without having to lift the whole thing up onto a wall, which you might not be able to do if you have poor abilities, so.
Yeah.
And I can see
We've
where
got the real estate.
you need to be in between the bikes to unlock, I mean, there's definitely a need there. I'm gonna buy myself a pipe bending machine though before you purchase these. And learn how to tack weld real quick.
Come on.
Got a welder.
Little arc welding and we're good to go.
Yeah.
All you need to do is just 2 welds for the plates at the bottom, and you can make,
Very simple.
you know, some money.
Sure.
Okay, well, if we've, I think.
Do we need to make any kind of formal motion, or are you just
I
informal?
don't think so. Yeah, we're still a while away from making action here. This just, since I was here already talking to you about a few things, this seemed like a good thing to bring into the list. So, almost done. SEC, next thing going on. So as you know, for some time, there has been a lot of discussion about where to take a landscape identity for the village. So as I understand it, historically, on the one hand, there have been advocates for more of a formal or an ornamental design. On the other hand, there have been advocates for more of a native or a prairie design, like what you see at Target. Here, a few months ago, this came to a head with a Lobola proposal to clear out buckthorn near the golf course on the north side of 176. You probably saw some of their work, which does look great, and power to them for their efforts. It opens up a whole new view shed. But coming out of that, we've worked with a consultant to really try to make an image, a playbook for public realms here in the village. So that's not actually the plan a few of you are looking at. That is an older plan for the central business district we wanted to give you as a reference. This is the working draft we have right now. So no need for a presentation or discussion necessarily, but wanted to make sure you had copies, so you had a chance to review it. We're accepting comments for anyone that's interested up through formal action on this a month from yesterday, but also especially if you have written comments, we've asked our stakeholders to get those to us next Wednesday. So if you have some time, if this is a subject of interest to you, I'm not a green thumb. I couldn't tell a rye from a buckthorn myself, but we want to make sure you feel included in this, that you have a chance to think about it as it may apply to commercial projects, and that you have a chance to contribute.
You know, just as another little point of history, when we were doing the downtown, which is what all this stuff is in here, the drawings that Jim Gamble did, we actually started thinking about it from Waukegan Road. And we never got that far. We came up and said, well, let's do the downtown first. But at one point in the discussion, Jim described the 176 from Waukegan Road up into town is gritty. And we thought, that is a perfect term. And anybody that wants to make it formal is going to be, it just doesn't seem right. Anyway, that was kind of where we adopted that notion of gritty, and we never really got there. It ran out of time and money. Best thing you could do there is get all the wires underground.
Yeah, but leave
We've
those
heard that a
great
lot.
old-
I like them.
I love those old.
Oh, no, I'm talking about.
Wire.
Oh, the old North Shore things.
Oh my God, those are the coolest things in
Yeah.
town. But yeah, get those wires.
Okay, so everything we need to know is in here?
Everything you ever need to know, yes, sir. So again,
So
just
do
want-
they have a direction that they want to go, or what? Is that in here?
Yeah, so if you look towards the back end, a lot of it is species and things of that nature, but there's some focus on the Route 176 corridor. Starting page 17, there's some sketches by Cliff Miller, pages 18 and 19. And then a bit of a focus on our village gateway signage and intersection treatments on 20 and 21. So that's really that from a design standpoint, that's where the meat of the plan is in those 5 pages or so. After that, it gets into some recommended plant species as well, if that's an area of interest for you. So I would definitely say we have participants in our stakeholder group. We have participants from the Garden Club. We have participants from Lake Bluff Open Lands. Certainly, I would say there are perennials and things of that nature in here, but very native and native-R oriented plant list and appearance. So I'll see if I can echo our consultant on this by way of explanation. If you look at page 17, the real meat of many of the playbook strategies, if you would, applied to 176, are thinking about using the existing trees and bones that are there, really focusing on getting rid of invasive species. And then the hallmarks of this strategy are these drifts of native grasses and forbs, low-mow, some of them relatively high growing, and inside of it, reusing a treatment that's here in the central business district today, a split rail fence. And so it envisions the split rail fence has these high grasses growing around it that come in natural drifts and then go into mowed edge as you get closer to the road itself, and also to create some visual spacing so that you can see into the golf course.
It looks actually pretty good. It's gritty,
Yeah. It's not formal.
not formal.
They tried that once, right? I mean, we saw some formal at that intersection, like the garden club or someone tried
Well,
to-
they did a couple of different ones, and that was Cliff Miller.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did one that was very formal,
Yeah.
and was gonna require full-time maintenance guy out there,
Right.
just going from corner to corner.
Yeah.
And then the other one was not so much. There's a place that they tell them they need to figure out how to contain the trash instead of chaining that barrel to the fence there.
I'm not familiar.
Oh, really?
No, I don't walk out that way too
Oh,
much.
right, right by where the kids cross the school, where the crossing guard is. There's a brown 50-gallon drum chained to the, maybe it's chained to the stop sign, it's chained to something there. It's a trash barrel. Pretty handsome.
Is it on the bike path, or is it where everything comes up to get across?
It's right where you come up,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right on the corner, I think.
That's where the people from West Terrace, where I live, throw out our PBRs before we go to the east side of town.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a very simple,
Goodness.
has good usage.
Well, with the drawing on page 18, the one big thing that's missing from there is all the electric wires.
Yeah, they're gonna put them underground.
If you drop back a page to page 16, I mean, the wires are a lot more noticeable, even if you fix everything else, but leave the wires there.
Yeah, the wires are not arc. You don't have the ability to do that.
And I doubt they're going to go, because boy, is that expensive to put them underground.
On the order of millions, yeah.
How about the split rail fence?
Millions per one.
Bothers me.
I don't think it's very necessary.
Yeah.
Could run them back up
Yeah.
I just
along
want to make
the
sure
top
that's
of
just not my
the,
take on it.
It's a broken fence,
Yeah,
so,
sure.
And then it's like,
Doesn't really-
it's- you're drawing attention to the fence.
right.
and
It's like
it should
a
be about the-
half a wine barrel
Yeah.
tipped over.
Right.
So where does this go
like it.
from here?
Sure. So we did our workshop on it here in this very room last night, sort of our wrapping, or at least a presentation workshop of the draft. So this has been in the public view for just a couple days. Here, especially before next Wednesday, we hope, and perhaps a bit as we go throughout the month, we'll continue to do some public outreach about it, seek written comment for anyone that's interested. And then in March, assuming everything goes well, the sustainability group will recommend it to the village board for adoption.
So one thing we were talking about among staff, and I think you guys were just talking about it, do you think we'd be better off without the split rail fence or with less of it? Is that what you guys were saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the split rail fence.
I don't think it functions really as anything,
Yeah.
except just
It almost feels
aesthetically,
like
I
you
mean,
planted around an old split rail fence to hide it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why spend the
Why
money on
spend the money?
building
Yeah, why?
Right.
a fence?
Yeah, it
That's-
feels,
Yeah, yeah.
When we write down those names, I think you just got on someone's Christmas card list.
got on one or off of one?
On one.
Both.
But not on the fence supplier. I always feel like I took
Yeah.
someone's vacation away from them,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
Possibly.
Yeah, I just feel, I mean, maybe at the corners makes sense, you know, you're kind of framing, but
I don't think it's necessary.
I don't either. I find it so false. You're trying to make everything look natural, and then you have these
Yeah.
weird fences, kind
Yeah.
of.
I just like the sweeps, the big sweeps of native prairie.
Yeah.
I mean,
There was, we actually got rid of it, but there was at one point a very pretty picture of a split rail fence surrounded by these blooming purple things. Again, I'm not a green thumb, but we'll do some A/B testing, see if people like it more when that picture's back in.
Okay, so this is for our perusal. What else?
For your perusal, again, if you have any comments, feel free to drop those by to my attention or email me, and we'll be happy to look at them, incorporate them in the plan. So,
Is this looked at as a potential thing of,
yeah, that was a big topic of discussion last night. Is, you know, the missing thing here is direction as far as phasing and budgets and some of the meat and potatoes of this. I think at the staff level, we're going to look at making some recommendations and incorporating them into the plan when it comes back for a final draft. Certainly, I think the consensus is to focus on the 176 corridor and especially sort of that northwestern end of the corridor as the first action steps. So that whole stand of buckthorn going from kind of the middle of the golf course northwest to the Skokie River, Skokie Ditch.
that's all buckthorn in
alignment.
there?
About all buckthorn, but a lot of it.
Yeah.
it's a lot of it.
Was there ash trees in there too? Because all of a sudden I notice it's really open.
A lot
Probably
of, so, most of the openness I've seen has been where they've done all the buckthorn clearance to the east. I still can't see through there in the summer. So there might be some ash, I'm not sure. I know there was, in our walks, there was, again, I'm not a green thumb, cottonwood, something like that in that area, same as what's over here in Artesian Park, but I think they figured that by the time you got rid of most of the invasives and volunteer trees, there wouldn't be a whole lot left. You'd be at just, you know, tree to lawn.
Okay. Anybody have any questions, Glenn?
Is that house leaving at the entrance, the maintenance entrance, or is that,
Sure. So I'm not as sharp as I should be on this one, but my understanding is the Park District still has a first right of refusal to purchase that
Did
if
they
and
buy
when
the
they
second one?
vacate it. I believe they did. So, and whenever it changes hands again, in theory, it should go away, but that hasn't quite happened yet.
because it looks like we've taken it over in this plan.
If that's the case, my information may be out of date.
No, okay.
This is just a side thing, but when they put up the netting along the driving range, that was years ago. There was a big controversy. They had very tall poles, and we made them shorten them down. Because it was like taller than the telephone poles, and you could really see them. Well, now, they don't have them up there anymore. The poles are still there, but the trees have grown up.
Yeah.
And I don't think they string the nets anymore. But part of the problem was the houses, because people couldn't drive their golf balls straight, so they were always whacking into the houses and going through windows and. Were you here for that? You were here for that.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a big controversy, putting those poles up.
They talked about putting up poles that had hinges in the middle so they could lower
Oh,
them
Lord,
down in the
it
winter.
was,
All kinds of crazy things.
okay, enough history.
Almost done. One last item, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, so back to the memo, there are a few things, well, let's start here. So the sustainability group has been crafting, will soon, we think, recommend a sustainability plan for the village. It has something on the order of 40 or 50 action steps that they hope to pursue over the next few years, which sounds like a lot. A lot of them are not as complicated as you would think. Some of them are listed here that affect your purview, and this really dovetails nicely with your design what are we calling it? Design review conversation. So some of these come from Brian Renner and other members of the group, but the thinking is, in the world of street furniture, how do we encourage private businesses to place recycling bins or to place pedestrian-oriented furniture like benches and bike racks and bicycle parking? In the world of landscaping, how do we encourage businesses to match up to something like this landscape plan when they make their landscape choices, especially the plant lists and some of the identity we're trying to cultivate from a landscape perspective. And then finally, when we think about parking lot lighting and lighting in general, how can we encourage essentially less lighting, or certainly more thoughtful lighting, trying to minimize the amount of ambient light we're emitting from our commercial areas. And so their thinking at this point is, in some ways, to make those duties part of what this group looks at when you do design reviews.
We do look at it,
Okay.
but we don't have any guidelines. And I think that's what we're missing. We've talked about dark sky, and we don't know anything about it, a little bit about it. And, every time a development comes along, the latest one being the target lights, I think everything we have said is nobody's going to have a pole out there that's over 30 feet. So that starts to dictate how many poles you have, depending on what foot candles or whatever they call it now. But anyway, we specify cutoffs and things like that, but with the kind of lighting that Brian's talking about, I don't know what that is, or if that's what we have out there, or what does Commonwealth Edison just, relamp the village with. So that I think needs to have some guidelines to it, and maybe they're not there yet. And it's not within our purview, but I think the other thing is the residential lighting. Everybody wants to, do everything but put a moat around their castle. So they got uplights on. Every time there's a 4-inch reveal in the house, they fashion uplights on it. But that's just me.
When I get home, I'll send you a picture of the house across the street from me.
It's very
Exactly what we're
proud,
talking about.
very proud of
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
Well, the one next
Positively
door to me,
glowing.
I don't need to turn my lights on inside the house at night.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I said positively glowing
Yeah,
to
it is.
being
Yeah.
proud of itself.
So go ahead with your, I think I interrupted whatever you were
No,
saying.
that was the discussion. So essentially, we know we have more conceptual work to go with these. They're just steps in the plan right now. Just wanted to make sure there was comfort, or if there isn't comfort, with the idea that you might, this group may see some guidelines coming forward that would be applied in your design reviews, that you may have a greater role in these areas in the future than you do today.
We are the only board that has 5 trained people in the arts. And we're not represented on a lot of things that we should be, like this last one. And that's all, I'm just pointing that out, that we spend more time looking at signs than anything else. So that piece.
We're an undervalued resource of the village.
Anybody else have anything? Glenn, is that it?
That's everything.
Did you get anything useful from us?
I got tons of useful things from you. I hope you had some use out of my time here too.
All
So
right, good.
it's a good discussion. Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thanks, Glenn.
Are we done? You got anything else?
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay, so we need a motion to go home. Or adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
All in favor? All right.
Aye.
You can take that.